Can we deny the existence of God?
Oh my, yes. Yes, we can.
No, we can't.
Yes, we can. Ugh. Fine, let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Today we're looking at a fellow who goes by Angel Cassiano, yet another theist who seems to feel the need to make videos in his car. What's that about, anyway? Seriously, why do they do this?
Romans chapter 1 states very, very clearly.
Okay, before we go any further, we gotta address something technical. Dude, you takes your phone, you times it like this. Vertical video is for vacuous vermin, not vivacious videographers. Get it right.
The God has made not only his existence known, but also his power and even his judgment.
I'm gonna start cutting out these long pauses in between his starts and stops. I promise I won't cut out anything he says in between them, and you can verify that because I always leave a link to the original video and the YouTube channel where I got it in the description. But otherwise, boy, would this video be long and boring.
Romans chapter 2 verses 14 and 15 establish that even his law, he has placed his law in the heart of every human being in the form of conscience.
Well, frankly, I don't much care what Romans says. Lord of the Rings claims that there's one ring to rule them all, but you don't see too terribly many people, maybe a few, basing their entire lives around Bilbo and Gandalf, do you? Apparently, it can't be said often enough. The Bible is not evidence. The Bible is the claim that needs proving. And you can claim your God gave you a conscience all you like, but I'm going to take responsibility for my own actions and the reasons behind them. Thank you very much indeed.
So, there is no really an atheist out there. What we have out there are people that are suppressing God's truth.
I've heard a lot of theists say this, that atheists really do believe, but we're just in denial, basically. And the impression I get is that they have to tell themselves this, even if they don't consciously realize it. Because if they don't, if they let themselves think for even a moment that there are people out there who really, genuinely don't think and feel the way they do about religion, they might have to question it. They might find themselves a little uncertain. And given how much emphasis their religion puts on faith, on belief without reason, one can certainly see how that might be a problem for them. To be fair, this is a hypothesis, but it seems to fit the available data.
That is also according to Romans 1, verse 18. The wrath of God is on those who use unrighteousness to suppress God's truth.
Unrighteousness. There are quite a lot of terms that are bandied about by theists so much that they seem to lose all meaning, or have always had their own religious-specific meaning, and this is one of them. At first, the definition seems rather obvious, but I figured I ought to be thorough, so I went and looked it up on a religious website, like you do. And what it said was, and I quote, "The use of this word in the Bible implies justice and conformance to established standards. Justice means doing the right thing, and conformance to established standards in the Bible refers to following the ways of God." So basically, what this guy said was that if you're being unrighteous, as in not bowing your head and falling in line like a good little drone, you're suppressing God's truth. If you are a free thinker who may find fault with the status quo, you deserve God's wrath for daring to present another point of view. Is this perhaps the reason so many describe themselves as God-fearing Christians?
Now, there are philosophical arguments about God, and I think that the ones that the atheists, or the so-called atheists, bring out the most is the issue of suffering, is the issue of pain. Why would God allow a child to be raped, abused, deprived of freedom, deprived of education, deprived of their childhood, Why, if God, who sees everything, would allow something like that to happen, something that awful to happen?
This is an argument that theists, or at least the Abrahamic ones, have brought upon themselves. As I see it, their God became so powerful because they were trying to compete with other religions. It seems most religions were actually pantheons, with each god having their own powers over certain aspects of nature or emotions, like gods of thunder, the sea, love, and war. And a lot of them seemed to go around killing each other off or causing permanent wounds that gave them really bad tempers, that kind of thing. The point is, their powers were limited and they were vulnerable. Then along comes Yahweh's little cult, and they shouted, "Our God has a bigger dick than your God. Obey or be destroyed." But from then on, they had this all-powerful God that quite often seemed unable to do things, an all-loving God that quite often seemed to be quite an asshole. If they hadn't tried to basically say, "My God times infinity," if they'd let him be flawed, it'd be a lot more difficult to point out the problem of him existing to fit his description. If they'd just said, "Yeah, sometimes God fucks up," the problems of suffering and evil wouldn't be such powerful arguments against his existence.
The reality is that none of us would ever come up with a good answer for a person who called themselves atheist.
Do you even have a good answer for yourself? This isn't a question that only atheists need addressed.
Bottom line is not that they're atheists. They know that God exists. Bottom line is they're angry with God.
Telling us what we think and feel? That's a paddling.
And because of these issues of suffering and injustice, they made their arguments against God.
Wrong. Like I said, your holy book describes your God in a way that does not fit the facts. I'm not angry at God. I'm pointing out continuity errors in his narrative. It's no different than pointing out a mistake they made somewhere in a movie, only this time it's your holy book. If someone fucks up a movie, sure, I might get a bit cranky, but at the people who wrote and filmed it, not the characters. Just like I'm wagging a finger at the people who wrote your Bible, not at the God they made up when they told the story.
And just the fact that they feel as appalled as we feel when we hear of these injustices is evidence that God have indeed placed morality in them. There's a sense of morality in every human being.
Then what about sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists, people with medically diagnosable mental disorders that royally fuck up their moral compass? And people all over the world from different cultures have very different ideas of what is or is not okay. And now you want to give your God credit for all of it, as if there could be no other possible explanation, your only evidence being a book written thousands of years ago. Is there any other situation where you'd be willing to accept something as true on so little? I don't think so.
Or even the folks that do evil, even folks through history that kill people and do all the evil, deep inside, they feel that they're doing it for a good cause, that there's a justifiable reason for them to do what they do.
And are you going to say that that is your God's doing too? Did God say to them, "Hey, you might be going around committing horrible atrocities. That's just your conscience talking. I'm the one telling you to feel good about yourself." Is that what's happening here? And you want us to believe your God is omnibenevolent? Right. Honestly, if your narrative allowed your God to fuck up once in a while, we'd be having a very different conversation right about now.
Hitler had a justifiable reason in his head.
Whoops, Godwin's Law. That's another paddling.
Now, today's days, we have atheists that, in the sense of the normal society expectations, they are good people.
Oh my, thank you very much.
However, the bottom line is that they cannot get to themselves. They cannot make themselves get to the point where they surrender their lives to Christ.
And you'd rather believe that's because we're angry at God than because your ability to show us he's real doesn't exactly pass muster, can't stand up to any critical scrutiny. How well you know us. Even better than we know ourselves, apparently.
They're fools. They're fools. They say that God doesn't exist. They're fools. That's what Psalm 14 tells us.
And I could say the same thing about you believing in a magical invisible sky fairy. So where does that leave us?
And we are encouraged, according to the book of Proverbs, not to answer them in their foolishness.
Well, I'm sure that'll get us to surrender to God now, won't it? Sounds more to me like you're just afraid to have a chat on a level playing field with people who might make a better case than you can. If you really had the courage of your convictions, you wouldn't be running scared. Think about it.
So this increase of secular humanism, this increase of reason, atheists are in love with the spirit of intellectualism. They are in love with information. They are in love with they're in love with education. They are in love with those things. They have that about them I respect.
Did anyone else get the impression he was about to call all of those a bad thing? I mean, I'm glad he didn't. Respect for that. But still.
A lot of them ultimately claim that they don't believe in God because they don't have any evidence that he exists. So they claim to have a degree of humility. And if they, some of them say that if they ever find evidence of God's existence, that they will believe. The problem is that they are not searching for God's existence.
First of all, says who? You say we're in love with knowledge. Do you think we'd be going to this much trouble if we didn't want to know the truth? But second, that's also not our job. You say God is real, you provide the evidence. If you found him, it shouldn't be so difficult to show him to us, now should it? And if you can't, then why should we even suspect you're not full of shit?
Because God has made his existence obvious.
Clearly, he hasn't. And if you think that he has, then we obviously have very different standards when it comes to showing that something exists. Yours seems to be based around having gut feelings and vague implications. And for some of us, that's just plain not enough. You're going to have to prove that God is real in a way that could at least potentially be tested in a lab using falsifiable data. Otherwise, you're just spinning fairy tales.
They go on the other extreme. They dedicate their lives to come against God. Not to search for God, but to come against God.
If that's the way you want to see it, I can't stop you. But it's not true. If your God really existed and it turned out he was a nice guy, well, I wouldn't worship him, 'cause I don't worship anybody. But I might be all, nice job there, big guy. You might not be perfect, but hey, thanks for what you have done. Or if he turned out to be the asshole he seems to be, I'd go looking for that magic God-killing weapon to do away with him. But first, you've got to prove he's real. Or he does, and in a way that left no doubt, something that could be seen with the senses and analyzed using science, in a way that didn't require faith. Until and unless that happens, I'll remain an atheist and a skeptic. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.